Covering the Universal Orlando Resort for over 4 years, you are listening to the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 178 of the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. I'm your host for today, Darren, and joining us we have Lee.
Hello everyone!
And Hunter.
How's it going, everybody?
Tracy is currently in hibernation. She will be back on the next show. Get well soon. Definitely.
She will be.
And we have a return visit from a special guest, theme park writer, reporter, and podcaster, Mr. Jim Hill. How are you doing today, Jim?
Hey guys, Happy New Year. Hope you guys are having a good 2016.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, yeah, we have Jim on to talk about what's going to happen this year in 2016 and in the future, but we're also going to delve into a couple of things that happened in 2015 as well. So,
yes. Jim, take it away.
Yes. Well, when you're talking about the future of Universal, you do have to kind of lean back a bit because, honestly, 2015 in a lot of ways was a game changer for Universal. And, you know, that there were so many things that got announced or so many things that got closed. And it's kind of ironic that this was the 25th anniversary year. And yet when you look back on it, how many parts of this park, you know, that were, you know, there from opening day, whether it's, you know, things like the Lucy attraction that suddenly went away. But yeah, let's start with the obvious that we had Sapphire Falls, which went from, you know, sort of a project that they were discussing to a site that was being cleared. And, you know, as 2015 got underway, construction began in earnest. And, you know, for those of us who would go over to Cabana Bay and get pictures from, you know, the fourth floor there of the construction, it was always kind of interesting that they admitted that they were building Sapphire Falls, but how long did we all look at the construction for Kong, you know, Skull Island, Reign of Kong? And it's like, what's that? You know, you know, I mean, it wasn't until May 6th of 2015 that they actually admitted that, you know, that's what they were building. I mean, everybody knew, you know, that there was some sort of Kong thing in the works. I mean, but, you know, that they hadn't officially announced it yet. Whereas Sapphire Falls, I mean, this is kind of an intriguing property, or at least to me. We're talking about the Universal Orlando Resort's fifth on-site resort. It's going to have, when it's completed, in fact, we're in the crunch period right now because they've already allowed people to start booking rooms. In fact, the first guests will be coming on property July 14th of this year. But it's once completed. It's 1,000 rooms with 77 suites. But for me, what's most intriguing about this hotel is not necessarily the Caribbean theming, but the 131,000 square feet of meeting space, which I don't know if you guys heard about this in the fall of this year, but they actually completed an expansion of the meeting space over at the Lowe's Royal Pacific. Yes. Very quietly, they jumped the meeting space over there. There was 85,000 square feet of meeting space. They almost doubled it. It's now up to 140,000 square feet of meeting space on that side. So it means that, and in fact, they've deliberately built a land bridge, that will connect the two resorts, but it connects through the meeting space. This will now allow groups of 20,000. In fact, that's the way they're advertising it. They have a space now that can handle 20 to 20,000 people. Wow. But they'll have $250,000 square feet of meeting space starting this summer. And for Universal, they believe that's key. That's the one thing they haven't really been able to chase. I mean, they've had some meeting space over at Portofino, but they're kind of they were stuck chasing smaller corporate groups. This allows them to go after much bigger game, which allows them to really sort of stabilize. The interesting thing is when you sell to corporate groups, you don't have to worry about the highs and lows of whether or not you've got an attraction or an event like Halloween Horror Night getting people to come to resort. You can sell to people who are coming down to Florida and for their event. You can bundle it. You can use our meeting space, and we'll get you into the parks and private parties and that sort of thing. And this is something Disney's been doing forever, and this is a thing that typically gets overlooked by theme park fans. But this is a huge thing for them that they'll be able to get that serious about selling to groups that want to come to Florida, especially now that people want to come to Florida and hang out with Harry Potter. So look for that to become a big deal going 2016, 2017.
Have you heard anything about the Express Pass situation with it then, Jim? Because I know they changed it all, didn't they, when they announced Sapphire Falls, that it was going to be set in the same bracket as the Royal Pacific. But obviously you get Express Pass for the Royal Pacific, but you're not going to get it for Sapphire Falls. But there was big rumours going around that the Express system, as we know it now, isn't going to be what it will be in the future.
Well, remember that, that this is a Universal that's kind of, looking down the road at what Disney's doing with its Magic Bands. And, the weird thing is, I think we all know about all the problems Disney had with the rollout of that system and how much it, depending on who you talk to, it was double or triple what it was originally supposed to cost.
Wow.
But there's been a huge guest satisfaction. The Disney in surveying folks finds out that they really, really love that system. And so Universal is looking at doing something with the Express system, but that's more in the line of, well, could we do the same thing Disney does? Could we do a system whereby, and remember, the genius of the Disney Magic Band system is that when they go for the full rollout version, and we're talking about, you can book 10 experiences in advance per day. And that includes, your character dining, where you stand for the parade and that sort of thing. You trap people in the park for the full day. They show up at 9 a.m. because that's when you got them set for their first character breakfast, and they don't leave till 10 o'clock at night because that's when you've scheduled them to stand under the fireworks in front of the castle. And that's what Universal would really love to be able to do, to, tell people this is you're going to be in Universal Studios, Florida for the day. And, that tomorrow's going to be your Islands Day, because that allows them to know that much better about how to staff and all that. But yeah, that there is something coming, but of course, Universal being a little bit smarter at this than Disney, they're not going to develop something in-house. They're going to shop around. There was already a system that they had in place that they basically bought off the shelf, and they're pretty much thinking along those same lines. It's like, let's not reinvent the wheel here. Let's find somebody who's created the system that we could adapt to our parks. Anyway, speaking of how these parks are going to change in the future, on May 7th, we had the big announcement of Nintendo and Universal, getting in bed together to bring the Nintendo games and characters and such to the parks.
Which is awesome.
It is. But it gets kind of intriguing because you have to understand that Universal made this deal with Nintendo president, and I want to pronounce his name correctly, Satoru Iwata. Satoru Iwata. Got it right on the third try. Okay. They announced the deal on May 7th, and Satoru dies at the age of 55 on July 12th. And, that there was... Universal waited a suitable period, I want to say 3 months, and allowed them to do a management change. I mean, they were initially very eager to get this project rolling. And I'm sure you folks heard the various stories about where initially they were looking on, doing something, that this was sort of, being eyeballed as a way to change out the Curious George ball play area, the Woody Woodpecker, coaster, and the Barney thing. In fact, my understanding, at least initially, was that the footprint was supposed to include the Animal Actors show, and the Animal Actors show for, again, you have to understand that these parks don't operate in a vacuum. Everybody since what happened to SeaWorld and Blackfish has got very, very concerned about animal rights and, how the public perceives shows where animals perform. I mean, even Disney is being very cautious going forward about Animal Kingdom. It kind of speaks volumes about, where is Disney spending money right now? That's they're putting in, Avatar, the World of Pandora, or excuse me, Pandora, the World of Avatar. I always get that wrong. Because again, it's not like, oh my God, look at the conditions you're making that 6-legged Black Panther thing live under. It's a robot. I think it's doing okay. But that and the Rivers of Light show, they're spending money. You haven't seen them build a new animal enclosure in quite some time. I mean, they brought in some new animals to the African safari thing. I want to say they've just introduced a set of wild dogs that'll be part of the show. But everybody's sort of getting skittish about that. So the notion of having a show that the public might turn on you about. So the idea was pull down Animal Actors, and there was for a time discussion about E.T. going as well. But Mr. Spielberg has made it very clear, that he's given up, the E.T. in Hollywood, and the one in Orlando stays. So
I hope that's true. I hope it does stay, because you look at how much stuff they've taken out of the parks. That is literally the last vestige of that park.
But it's such a terrible ride, Lee.
I don't know. Do you know what? We went on it in October, and I even got Tracy to be convinced that it wasn't as bad as she remembered it, and I quite enjoy it.
Okay. I mean, it says a lot for me that the queue is more enjoyable than the ride. I mean, I think the queue, honestly, is some of the best storytelling that was done at the first iteration of Universal Studios. I mean, you walk in there, you had the pine scent, you're in the dark woods, and you had you saw that the stuff from the film. You saw that the device that E.T. was using to contact the mothership and all that. No, there was some great stuff, but then you got on the ride, and it was
we talked about it before on the show that, you look when that ride opened, that was an elaborate themed queue before elaborate themed queues became a thing like they are now.
No, absolutely. And it just, I just wish the people who built the queue built the ride.
I could almost argue that I feel the same way about Escape from Gringotts.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a topic for another show, but yeah, no, I don't know. I just, that, long story short, that's staying, and in fact, that actually did in fact impact what's going on with Nintendo, because they Universal Creative kept digging down into these these games and these characters, and initially they thought, kind of a small, use the Potter system, just sort of mini land, heavily themed, to do a couple of different rides and experiences. And it's obviously changed. I mean, there is a reason that, the company went after that, that 450 acres of land over by the convention system. But we'll get to that. Okay,
Jim, just tell me one thing. It's not going into Marvel Superhero Island, is it?
What are we talking about?
Nintendo.
No. If anything, all you have to do is look at the time and money that's being spent on the Incredible Hulk redo. Look, all you have to do is go through the shops at Marvel Superhero Island. Okay, I mean, I was in there this fall, and in fact, I was taking pictures of the merch from Ant-Man and the merch that's in there from Age of Ultron. There is honestly nobody happier on the planet with what Disney is doing with the Marvel characters and the films and all that than Universal. That they have, they did a decent job of bringing these characters into a theme park setting in '99, but the gas that Disney has put in the tank with, now 2 new Marvel movies per year. I mean, literally, it's the Disney merch selling in the Universal parks, and they couldn't be happier. So that's not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, I will tell you that Disney's attorneys continue to work really, really hard in regard to all aspects of the Marvel property. They're constantly trying to recover characters that got away. In fact, if what I'm hearing is true, Disney is in the final stage of getting the Fantastic Four back from Fox.
They need to.
Yeah. But it's one of these things where it's like, in regard to the theme park rights for Orlando, I don't see Universal giving these up anytime soon. Again, more to the point, Disney has to go to Comcast with something they actually want, and in order to make this deal. And so far, everything that Disney has brought to the table, Universal runs the numbers, and it's based on merch sales, based on the number of people who come into the park to ride things like Hulk and Spider-Man. They're just not willing to take it off the table. So no, Nintendo is not going into Marvel Superhero Island. In fact, my understanding is the lesson that they've learned from Harry Potter is don't make the mistake of going small, with a property that's big, that's expansive. So that's kind of why we've seen them step away from a mini land in the parks to something of size. Anyway, speaking of things of size, I mean, if you've been over to Cabana Bay and walk down to the end of the Americana, that sort of thing, looked out at the construction site, Universal Volcano Bay was charging along for quite some time before they finally officially announced it on May 28th of this year. And then it got kind of interesting. I mean, you watched NBA close, the NBA City, and this was after, think about it, there's been a 2-year program in place to swap out, to change out all aspects of City Walk, refresh all of the restaurants, that sort of thing, give it a good. And here you had NBA City, which had all of this foot traffic going back and forth between the parks, and they haven't touched it yet. In fact, it's been kind of interesting that you haven't even heard any talk about who's going in there. And if anything, the irony is that evidently Disney had made the deal to bring the NBA to the west side of Disney Springs to finally, to use this excuse to finally close Disney Quest, which is, face it, it's been out of date since 2002. That's the last time they put a new experience in there. And now that deal seems to have fallen apart, because where originally Disney Quest was supposed to have closed this month, and now the closing has supposedly been pushed off to 2017.
Right, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. But anyway, getting back to things that close. I mean, as a film buff, as somebody who loved the fact that they did things like the Lucy display, where you got to see her costumes and, for example, artwork from that Diamond Lil movie, the Diamond Joe Brady thing that Lucy was supposed to make with Jackie Gleason and never made. It's kind of sad to see that go away. But on the other hand, Hello Kitty is huge, and for a resort that now is drawing far more international travelers thanks to Harry Potter. They felt very strongly about bringing that in. Then, and speaking of things closing, we had on June 17th, we had the announcement that Wet n Wild would be closing. And, they were very cagey for a while about what the actual close date would be, but it finally later in the year they revealed it was December 31st, 2016. And they haven't officially said this yet. And in fact, it's kind of a bone of contention with the folks who work at Wet n Wild. But basically, the idea is that select members of the staff of that water park, which, let's remember, was America's first water park, will then transfer over to Volcano Bay for new job assignments and retraining. But again, they're very clear that not everybody's going over, because this is, it's a very sophisticated park. Again, they keep stressing the water theme park. Mm-hmm. And that, this isn't going to be, the skill set that you had that got you a job at Wet n Wild isn't necessarily going to be the same skill set that's going to help you out over at Volcano Bay. And then charging into August. For me, one of the things I liked was, I wish they'd actually had this open for the kickoff of the 25th anniversary. Which, were you guys surprised at all that they really didn't hit that harder than they did? That there was, that it was for a 25th anniversary celebration, it was relatively quiet.
It was terrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. We expected a lot more than some, store window fronts changing, to iconic films and things like that. And a few homages to previous attractions that were there. For an anniversary like the 25th, you'd expect them to go all out. And
I even expected there to be more merchandise than was available.
Certainly.
Well, that's the one thing that I liked was the Studio Vault store, the thing that opened in August, where at least you could get merch associated with attractions that had closed and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would have been really nice is if they did some reproduction of some actual merchandise from those rides, from the gift shops of those rides back then. I think that would have been pretty neat as well. And something that they were fully capable of doing.
Well, it's funny, if you look at the two halves of the park, like Halloween Horror Nights, the 25th, they totally knocked it out of the park this year with merch through to the event, everything. Yet for the anniversary of the park, it was like,
Very true.
Yeah. I don't know. It was a strange situation, but at the same time, you did get that shop, and that the people who did. For example, I remember being in there for this fall when they had the shirts that celebrated, the day that Marty McFly actually went. Time jumped into 2015, and to see the number of people who just had to have that shirt. So, I guess, again, it's good to see them doing things like that. But circling back on what we were talking about earlier with Marvel Superhero Island, the day after Labor Day, September 8th, we saw the closure of the Incredible Hulk. And, that's a lot of people are intrigued as to what's going to go on here. I can tell you folks flat out, Universal isn't going to do anything to impact that, 1,920 people ride this thing an hour. Good. The things that people love, that it does 7 inversions, that it goes 67 miles an hour, it has a 105-foot drop at the start, that's all staying in place. This is basically about redoing the queue. So, look, in the 16, 17 years since the park opened in 99, a lot more people are using mechanized wheelchairs, are using the electric carts, and that became problematic with the queue that had been designed in 99. Nice. Coupled with, that there have been advances in, sound technology, that they wanted to do a better presentation overall. So this is, it's not the Spider-Man redo. Don't expect them, to have, a marvelous new 4D experience with a reprogrammed scoop and that sort of thing. You'll have a much better, a wider, easier to negotiate queue. You'll have, some new pre-show elements, but it's the same fun coaster that it's always going to be.
I assume part of this was down to the Marvel contract as well, then, was it, Jim? Because I know one of the big things in that contract is they have to keep it up to a standard that Disney hold high enough for that property.
Well, but at the same time, you have to understand that they are also locked into the likenesses that they signed in the master licensing contract. That this isn't going to be, the look of the Hulk in this thing isn't going to be changed out for the look of the Hulk from, the Avengers movies.
Right.
It's, again, there's kind of a separate nations treaty here. But yeah, they do have to honor the original contract, and keep things up to a certain standard. But at the same time, it's just sort of like, this is a you don't fix what ain't broke situation, and people love this coaster. In fact, my sister-in-law was so upset that she was down there this fall and Hulk wasn't open. That's one of the highlights of her her visits to Orlando. But it's just like, they're fixing the beginning. They're going to redo the queue. It'll be as good, if not better, when you come back, next year or thereabouts.
It was the same for us. It was the first year we've been over where our youngest was tall enough to ride it, and sorry, you can't.
Yeah. And it's so iconic as far as the sound that it makes over there in that corner and everything. If you really feel something missing when it's not there.
Well, what's funny is that it was the very first ride that opened at Islands that had to be tweaked. In fact, I had a friend who was a member of the opening team, and they were there for the first day of soft opening. And, they fire the coaster up, and he's standing on the bridge, greeting people as they come into Superstar Island, and he hears this smash noise next to, and there at his feet is somebody's cell phone, that they only found out after they began letting actual really for real tourists ride on this thing, but, what would happen when it inverted at that speed. And it was the very next morning that they first had that net stretched across the top of that bridge. And, I always enjoy going under that about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon and looking up at the wallets and the cameras and everything else. It's just sort of the end of the day, they bring the net down, collect it, and you can go back and get your stuff, but yeah, that was the first tweak they actually made at that park. And on the other hand, for those of us who, went to Universal during its early days and, rode Earthquake, the big one, or enjoyed how they figured out to sort of reskin and retool the ride with Disaster, a major motion picture ride starring you. That went away on the exact same day, September 8th. And that's now going to become the home of Fast and Furious Supercharged for the East Coast version. That will open in 2017. Kind of interesting. They are not using the same ride film from Hollywood. This will be fitting the setting that this is going to be you racing through the streets of San Francisco. The ride system itself, the motion base, everything they do in California will be impacting. They're taking the lessons learned from that facility, which was impressive as hell. I got to go through there during the final phase of construction, and in order to accommodate those wraparound screens, they had to build the interior of that ride building is, there are no support poles because, again, you need to have a wraparound screen to buy that illusion. And that's what they have to go in and do now, is that they're basically gutting the old show building that housed the earthquake sequence, and we'll be stripping that down to the bare walls and then trying to retrofit in these screens. So, going to be very interesting to see, how there's, we'll be getting more details about that going into 2016, 2017. But, there's so much stuff going on right now. It's such a crazy time at the resort. I mean, when you think about it, just in this same window of time, they announced the expansion of Cabana Bay. You get 2 more towers being built with an additional 400 rooms on the south end of the property. Right. And then right on the heels of that, you suddenly have, this is a Universal that announces Universal Studios Beijing, and that just fascinates me because if you know your theme park history, and where Disney's building its park right now in Shanghai was the piece of land that Universal was supposed to build its first China park on, and they pulled out. They got a little concerned about the site and who was going to build the park and that sort of thing, and they bailed out. And Disney's learned the hard way that there are so many stories now coming out of, in fact, Bob Iger, in an interview with Bloomberg just last week, basically had to admit that they've had so many problems with the Chinese contractors building the park. There have been some show buildings and some attractions over there where they've had to tear out the foundations 2 and 3 times to get the correct concrete pour.
Oh, God.
It's been a really, really tough project.
Yeah.
And here's Universal. I mean, the Beijing park, and this is supposed to open in 2019, guys. It's a 300-acre park, and in fact, at full build out, I mean, it's going to have the first Universal branded hotel. You're actually going to, in a weird borrowing of an idea from Disney, you're going to enter through, like Disneyland Paris, you're going to enter under a Universal themed hotel and come out on the other side. And I don't know if you guys have looked at the concept art for this thing, but it's got a Jurassic World. It's going to have, a big Potter section. It's a lot of Universal's greatest hits, plus, enough mystery buildings that you assume that, okay, this is where we're going to see the Nintendo stuff go. Though that said, there is a second phase planned for this project that will include another theme park, a water park, and 5 additional resort hotels. At full build out, it'll be 1,000 acres. So, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's huge. And then, literally 2 weeks later, Universal announces that they've acquired a majority share in Universal Studios Japan. They managed to get 51% of the company, and now, they view these 2 parks as, this is how they're going to manage their theme park growth in the Asia market. And what's kind of intriguing is when the park opened in 2001, NBC Universal, or back in that day, I guess that was Vivendi, they owned 24% of the park, but they sold off everything in 2007. So, and again, my understanding was it's actually the Potter money, the money they've been making off of the back of Potter coming to the parks, that has allowed them to go back and buy Universal, this majority share in Universal Japan, and a lot of that was because of how Potter has turned around attendance at the Osaka park.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, the 8th wonder of the world is returning to Universal Orlando Resort. So let our friends at Fairy Godmother Travel take care of the resort reservation. They are a Universal Parks and Resorts specialist, as well as being an authorised Disney vacation planner, and their service is free to you. From the awesome Cabana Bay Hotel to those other hotels run by a mouse, Fairy Godmother Travel can book all your Orlando vacation needs, so you don't need to miss the chance to see the amazing King Kong in the flesh. And please make sure to let them know that you heard about Fairy Godmother Travel because of UUOP. Because every UUOP referral helps us to continue to bring you the greatest Universal coverage. Contact them today by phone at 832-284-4002 or toll free at 888-939-642539 or go to fairygodmothertravel.com.
Let fairy godmother travel make your next vacation magical.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming.
Anyway, running further into the fall here, we got the announcement of the race through New York with Jimmy Fallon. That came on October 27th. And, of course, in order to make room for that ride, we had to close Twister on November 1st. And, you know, I think you and I, Lee, talked earlier about the earlier version of this ride when they were going to, it was supposed to look like Jimmy had snuck in and, you know, basically, you know, took over the Twister attraction. And they've gone the other way. They've buried the needle for this thing. I mean, when you go into this building right now, when they finish building it, when it opens in 2017, you're going to feel like you're actually in Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center. You know, they're going to do this full bore recreation of the, you know, the historic, you know, Tonight Show studio. And just like on the show where the celebrities compete against one another, you're going to be, you know, all over New York City. You know, I don't know. For me, I kind of like the sillier, looser, funnier idea on this, but you know, the hard reality is that when you have people who travel all over the world, you know, who are paying top dollar to come into your theme park, they don't appreciate it when you throw a bed sheet over a marquee and have written on it with shoe polish.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, no, I want a real ride, so that's what they decided to do.
I'm assuming it's going to be screen-based then, Jim, is it?
Yeah, but at the same time, screen with motion base, with physical effects in the theater. There's a lot of, and again, if you've seen any of the stuff, the craziness that Jimmy does on the actual show, that's going to be part of this. More to the point that one of the reasons they cut this deal is that Jimmy is supposedly going to be coming back to Universal at least once a year. In fact, if my understanding of the deal is they were going to spend a week shooting in Orlando every year going forward after this thing opens. He'll be down, you know, the week it opens, they'll be broadcasting live from the park. Mm-hmm. Long term, this will probably also go out to Hollywood. And Jimmy supposedly has cut a deal with the theme park division out there as well to do a series of live shows from Hollywood. So it's, again, this is kind of NBC and Universal. You know, they've done a couple of tests for this over the past year or so. You may remember the Today Show being down there and One Direction doing concerts at the park and that sort of thing, which then turned into a TV special. Right. You're going to see a lot more of this stuff that you know, this is NBC using or Universal using NBC to leverage the parks to make them that much more popular.
Yeah, we had heard about like a Soarin' type of ride vehicle system for the Jimmy Fallon thing. Is there any accuracy to that you know of yet? Or
I'd heard it was actually going to be the Kuka arm.
Well, I mean, there's this. You know, the interesting thing is that there's been this ride system that actually Disney initially proposed for a lava coaster that was going to be done at the Magic Kingdom.
The Adventureland coaster.
Yes. And, you know, the notion was there was going to be a story beat in the middle of this thing where you're riding in a standard coaster. And then there's a horrible, you know, the volcano erupts and you're literally the bottom of your vehicle falls away and you're still strapped to a seat, you know, but you're now looking down straight into lava and that sort of thing. Oh. I get a wonderful show beat. You know, Disney couldn't bring itself to build the as I remember correctly, it was supposed to be tied to Atlantis, the from 2000. Yeah. And that film obviously didn't perform nearly as well as Disney had hoped. And so, you know, that thing got tabled. Supposedly, one of the guys who's working on the Jimmy Fallon thing It's Jason Sorrell, who's, remember, was a former Imagineer who came over to from the Universal from Disney. And, Jason has this voluminous knowledge of, things that Disney almost did and backed away from. Mm-hmm. And my understanding or at least the story I was told, he was the guy who was championing this moment that, you are on the streets of New York and then suddenly you're up in the air flying over skyscrapers and things like that. And that, wouldn't it be cool if your vehicle starts to fall apart, as this is happening and you can look down at the city. So yeah, that's, a soaring type ride vehicle or at least a soaring type story moment. How they're going to pull this off. Trust me, I'm kicking the tires in this. I'm calling in favors, but you see the problem with writing or talking about Universal Creative is compared to Disney, which has hundreds of Imagineers, they have such a small team that it's relatively hard to get a lot of them to talk because it's like, look, there's only 6 of us, and when the story comes out, it was one of us, and then that gets tough. So. And speaking of sky, soaring through the sky, we had kind of an interesting moment for Universal back in late November, early December, when it became pretty obvious that it was Universal that was trying to put the kibosh on the Skyplex project. Mm-hmm. Just the whole notion of it will. That 500-foot tall roller coaster will ruin our view. And it's like, well, I have to see past Dr. Doom's Fearfall in order to see the 500-foot tall roller coaster. But look, let's be obvious here that the reason that Universal was pushing back so hard against Skyplex is because when Wet and Wild shuts down, they're going to flatten that space, and they have plans for that space. And they just didn't want a 500-foot tall roller coaster looming over what they want to do there. So they didn't win that battle, and it's, in a weird sort of way that from talking with some Orlando insiders, they were just to the effect of like, look, if Universal hadn't, gotten involved, the financing for this project was pretty iffy to begin with. And, it was entirely possible that the city council wasn't going to allow it to be built. But, suddenly it was in the spotlight and they were able to change down additional people to help with the financing. And, the city felt like they wanted to prove that, the city councils, like, look, the commissioners, that were not being pushed around by Universal, so that they gave them the right to go forward. So, that was kind of a tough loss. But then again, that was tempered by what happened on December 23rd, when Universal bought those 450 acres of, land right up by the convention center.
Which is quite possibly the biggest theme park news we've had for a long, long time.
Well, what I find intriguing is, think about it. They sold off. These 450 acres that they bought were part of the 1,200 acres that they owned next to Lockheed Martin. I mean, they bought them. I want to say, what is it? Late 99 or thereabouts, and it wasn't till and Vivendi was getting the company ready to be sold. They bought 2,000 acres in September of 1998. And then when Vivendi was getting Universal ready to sell off to somebody else, at that time, the plan was they were going to build 2 18-hole golf courses. They were going to build an additional 10,000 hotel rooms, 700 timeshares. There was going to be over $2 million worth of retail space. And there was room for, depending on who you talk to, 3 to 5 different you know, theme parks back here, and so they just started selling it off. And well, again, this was also during the period that GE owned NBC Universal. And for some odd reason, they decided that when they were getting ready to sell to Comcast, they wanted to make it easy, so they sold off this property. And it's been, if you talk to the guys in Universal Creative, it's the moment it just broke their heart because they had this huge piece of blank canvas that got, and now they've got less than half of it back, but they have it. And again, from what we were talking about earlier, the Nintendo properties and how, especially for the next generation of theme park attendees. I mean, face it, we're in the past 10 to 15 years, gaming has surpassed the revenue that Hollywood makes annually. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who sit at home who play Halo or, just the Call of Duty, those sorts of games who, will invest hours upon hours exploring these worlds and spending time with these characters. And, I mean, think about, all of us as kids who played Mario Kart and that sort of thing. So it's like, these are, again, in a weird sort of way, for the people who've developed the studio theme parks that put us, again, remember that when Universal opened in 1990, this was the place that was, the way they promoted themselves. You get to ride the movies. And now for this next generation of people, you want to come to your theme parks. I mean, Universal's done these amazing immersive environments with the, Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley. Mm-hmm. And wouldn't it be cool if they could do the same thing with, the various Nintendo properties? I mean, if you could literally climb into a cart and race with Mario.
And Jim, I've actually said recently on the podcast that for a lot of people, born and raised in the 80s and onward, those are they have the same weight that those classic Disney characters do to a lot of people now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what's so bright about Universal making this deal. Of course, now the challenge is getting the new head of Nintendo, the gentleman, I'm blanking his name, that came in behind Satoru, and, getting him on board with the notion of, when we made this deal, we were talking land, how would you feel about park, and that's what's going to get interesting now. They have the land. They actually have two pieces of land. If you think about Wet and Wild, closing its doors December 31st, 2016, and they'll flatten that. And you have the piece of property by the Orange County Convention Center, which, again, doubling back on what we were talking about Sapphire Falls and its combined convention space, with the Lowe's Royal Pacific. One of the things that really, really excited Universal Creative, at least initially, about this other piece of property, the old Lockheed Martin property, was the notion of everybody who goes to the Orange County Convention Center. If we had the park that was closest, I mean, that you wouldn't have to get in a car and drive 15, 20, 30 minutes up the road to go to Disney, or 10 minutes down the road to Universal. If they could walk out the door of the convention center and go over to a Universal park, the money that they'd make. That's honestly, that's, if you wonder why the Orlando Eye got built where it was, that's the same thing. That they wanted the proximity of the convention center and the tens of thousands of people who go in there every day for conventions. So, this is, in a weird sort of way, 2015 was the year that Universal played chess. And I guess the downside is that we're still, in the preliminary moves of the game. If you look cold-bloodedly at it and, you look at an earthquake going away to make room for a, Fast and Furious ride, which is, honestly, one of the, Universal's top grossing film series. Likewise, you look at Twister going away to, for a show that's built around the Tonight Show, which is a top earning property for for the NBC arm of things. I mean, a lot of it is the company now coming together in a way that it just hasn't in the past. And I'm going to be kind of intrigued, to watch what happens over on the heels of Skull Island, Reign of Kong, in the Jurassic Park area, because Jurassic World, as you guys probably heard, that that's now a trilogy.
Yep.
There's films coming there, and we will see Jurassic Park rethought and refiltered through the Jurassic World sensibility.
See, me and Tracy have discussed this. If they talk about putting a third gate on that new land they've bought, they could get a perfect idea for them is to take out Jurassic Park out of Islands of Adventure and put a Jurassic World area in the new park, which gives you a new Jurassic World area plus an expansion plot of land in Islands of Adventure that you can do whatever you like with.
Well, the problem with doing that is that if you look cold-bloodedly at Jurassic Park, at the amount of money that's been spent on building the Jurassic River ride, the visitor center, not to say that it couldn't be done, and that that it certainly is an idea that they will kick the tires of. But the challenge is, what do you replace that with? What property? Right now, people walk into this, into islands. And they come through port of entry, they reach the water point, and they look across the way, and there's the visitor center, and there's Hogsmeade Castle, and there's the Me Ship the Olive. There's all this iconography that drives you into the park. And so it's like, if you're going to take that out and then build a brand new, and face it, the other problem with doing a Jurassic Park is, that we've seen from the movies that if something eventually goes horribly wrong, and is that concept. Can you do that 10 different times? Can you, we're going to go on this road. Oh, something goes horribly wrong. Can you repeat that story over and over again? But again, not to poo-poo the idea, who knows? They may come up with some wonderful ideas for Jurassic World 2 and Jurassic World 3 that lend themselves to theme parks beautifully. And, in 5 to 10 years, I may be eating my words as, Lee and I stroll down the main street there at, Jurassic World Orlando. It's, there's a lot of balls in the air right now. And in fact, to me, it's kind of intriguing just in the past week to 10 days. I'm sure you guys have seen the stories that have been breaking out there about supposedly the Mummy, Revenge of the Mummy ride being closed for a Secret Life of Dogs ride, or a Secret Life of Pets ride.
That was in Hollywood, though, wasn't it? I'm sure I heard it was in Hollywood. They were talking about closing that down. But
here's where all right. Here's my problem. The Secret Life of Pets. If we've all seen the trailers. Okay, this is a comedy set in an urban environment. Now, if you were telling me that they were going to change out the Revenge of the Mummy ride at Universal Studios Orlando, which again is set in New York City, I could buy this. I could buy this in a heartbeat. Because okay, it's the right ride for the right setting. But if you look at the bottom lot of, the lower lot of Universal Studios Hollywood, you have, you've got your, your Jurassic Park River ride there. You've got your Transformers ride. Again, then you have your Revenge of the Mummy. You have three thrill rides in very close proximity, and that's what drives people down the Starcade. I don't see. First of all, Secret Life of Pets doesn't seem to lend itself to a ride. I mean, it's like, and more to the point, for Universal to be having this conversation, may face it, when did Despicable Me Minion Mayhem open? It was a year and a half, 2 years after Despicable Me was out in theaters, made money. You had a Mike West who could look at the movie and figure a path in, and saw that it's okay. It's Gru's Secret Lab. It's we're touring that. We've got a story that keys off of the girl's anniversary being adopted. There was a path in. I don't see, particularly on a film that hasn't come out yet and has proved itself financially, that Universal would be betting, on a Secret Life of Pets ride. I could see them look that the character designs that they've shown in the trailer are adorable. They're really funny. I can see the company getting behind this with a big wave of plush and action figures and that sort of thing. But the talk right now, and especially the other thing that makes me think this, just something about this rumor that doesn't smell right. They're talking about replacing the Mummy ride. In November of 2015, you guys probably saw the story about how Universal is looking to reboot the Mummy series, and they were in talk with Tom Cruise to come in as the new, lead actor in the series.
Yeah.
If you're going to bring Tom Cruise in to revive the Mummy, which, let's remember, Universal has decided that its way to battle Marvel or the DC superhero movies that Warner's is doing is to revive its monster series. And so The Mummy was supposed to be, the first new film of that series. And I think I was reading just last week, they've hired a writer for a new Bride of Frankenstein movie. And it's like, if that's going on, why would they shut down the Mummy ride?
Mm.
Wouldn't you keep the Mummy infrastructure in place? And then, particularly if that movie was supposed to come out in 2018. I'm just saying that, a lot of people have jumped in this rumor and run with it. And it just, my understanding about the way what Universal, NBC, Universal, Comcast has in the works right now, and the way Universal Creative operates, it just doesn't line up properly. Not to say that they aren't maybe looking at doing something with that property for the parks, but for them to talk specifically about taking out the Mummy at Universal Studios Hollywood out of that building, which I'll tell you I had friends who worked on that. They had a hell of a time shoehorning in that coaster into the old ET building. And this is the other thing you guys have to take into consideration when you're talking about that. That's a working movie studio that in fact, during the construction of the Mummy, or for that matter, during the construction of Transformers, there was constant pushback from the shows that were actually shooting in stages around that because of the construction noise.
Right.
So this isn't something that Universal does casually. That, that's the real bread and butter of that studio, is it's a working studio and the theme park is great. It's an additional revenue source, but ultimately that's a working studio. And, when you're talking about changing out an attraction, after you've just spent, the dust is barely settled on Transformers out there. I don't know. I would be genuinely surprised if this actually happens. But again, I have been wrong before.
Well, all right then, Jim. So the big rumor I heard surrounding Secret Life of Pets that's been going around the sort of Orlando-based forums was that it was going to be an animatronic dark ride taking over the Pandemonium Theatre on the edge of Toon Lagoon. Which it would seem to fit more there because it's a cartoon.
Right. Yeah. Again, the only problem with the Pandemonium Theater, and in fact, later this month, you'll see the reason that Universal is reluctant to take out the Pandemonium Theater. That's the venue for a number of the presentations for the celebration of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And in the theme park world, when you have a theater or you have a space that you only use once or twice a year, but or one or two times a year, but you're able to get thousands upon thousands of people in and they really enjoy the experience, it's worth letting it stand empty for another 340 days a year to have it, to do that. Not to say that they haven't looked hard at Cartoon Lagoon. I mean, you and I, Lee, have talked in the past about, there was once a plan that this was where the Lord of the Rings was supposed to go in, and Universal was chasing those rights really, really hard. But in fact, a friend of mine, Drew Taylor, flat out asked Peter Jackson about it during the press for Battle of the Five Armies, and Peter just basically pushed back and said, "It's the Tolkien family." I don't think they got really, really mad when they saw that the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit one-armed bandits, that went into Vegas and Atlantic City and that sort of thing, and they kind of put their foot down at that point. So it would be hard. Basically, you'd have to take the family to court, and you'd have to battle. To say that the original contract that Saul, I'm blanking Saul's last name, but the gentleman who signed the deal way back when, that actually got the Ralph Bakshi, that first Lord of the Rings animated feature made. It's the language of that deal that actually allowed them to make the 6 live action Tolkien films to date.
Yes,
and that was the one that everyone was hoping would lead to the theme park rights. But again, just based on the family wasn't happy with those movies, and the family wasn't happy with the machines in Las Vegas, and they sort of put their foot down. So for now, that's tabled. Not to say that in a couple of years someone won't make another run at it, and who knows, if one generation of the Tolkien family dies off, then the next may be perfectly happy to see them, the characters and that go into a theme park setting. That Universal was kind of hoping that, Joe Rowling would plow the road for them with the Tolkien family.
Yeah.
But again, that's you have to understand that, so many of these deals are based on personalities. In fact, again, the Nintendo deal was because the guy was in charge of Nintendo at that point was so excited about, look what they did with Harry Potter. Oh my God, imagine if they did that with our Nintendo characters. And, I've been trying to get some decent info when the new gentleman was in charge of Nintendo. And I guess he wasn't necessarily a creative. So I think it's going to be a harder sell to get him on board with the notion of going from a land to a park. Mm-hmm. So, but I guess we'll have to see.
Yes.
So. Yeah, definitely. And we are going to have to wrap up the show here, but thank you definitely, Jim, for joining us and giving us some insight into the potential future. As we know with Universal, that can change on a dime at any point. Yeah. So
no, they are such a. In fact, that's half the fun of writing about them or dealing with these folks is the fact that they'll do that. They're just, they like kind of keeping people off balance. And I mean, think about it. We are 6 months out from the first guests coming, the people going to Sapphire Falls. Have you guys heard anything about an opening date for Kong?
Nope.
Or
summer.
Yeah, well, no, that's it exactly. Summer. And looking further down the pike. Same thing about Volcano Bay. That is there an opening date for that? And it's like nope. But when they do open it, it's going to be amazing.
You can understand why they don't put opening dates on things, because the problem is if you stick a date on it and people book trips on it and you don't get it open for that date, you've got a lot of disgruntled people.
Yeah, and they did have, I don't know if you remember when, that there were a lot of people who, based on early information, booked trips to be there when Diagon Alley first opened, and how that got pushed back to the middle of July before they, were finally able to get Escape from Gringotts running well enough that they could, finally throw open the land. I don't know. What's kind of interesting for me right now is, of course, really, if we're talking hopefully about Universal Parks and Resorts, the focus right now is on Hollywood and the opening of their Harry Potter. In fact, it was so funny. If you go on eBay right now, there are people selling bands to the very first previews for the Hollywood Harry Potter, which will supposedly happen in March sometime. But that evidently they've issued already to employees or folks bands for the whole family, and they're available right now on eBay if you are willing to pay top dollar. So if you want to be the first one in to see, what the West Coast version of Hogsmeade is in March, just 60 some odd days down the line, that's where you want to go. The rest of us have to wait till it officially opens in April sometime.
Amazing. Yeah, but until then, it looks like 2016, with the exception of, like you said, Sapphire opening and Kong opening, we're gonna have a lot of construction going on this side, so I think we're gonna be laying low other than those two large openings there. And
but Kong, somebody slipped me a blueprint the other day of the 6 show scenes from it, and this is Kong's gonna be worth the wait. Awesome. In fact, I guess the thing that's going to intrigue me about Kong is where, the new vehicle going out the door full of 40 people every 70 seconds or so. And it's like, where is everybody going to line up for this? Because, that's looking at the queue and the external queue and that sort of thing. I think they're going to have some line issues, come the summer. So, just going to be interesting to see how they handle the crowds there.
Yep, definitely, and that's what we're here for. We'll let us know how they handle situations like that. So yeah, that will do it for the show here. Thank you again, Jim, for coming on. We really appreciate it, and we'll have you on again in the future for sure.
No, thank you guys. I always enjoy talking about this park. So, or this resort, or the people who run this resort, all of the above. So,
all right. So yeah, for Lee, Hunter, the absent Tracy, and for Jim, this has been the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast.
That's it for another unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. Listen to us on Stitcher, Google Play, and all your podcast apps. Email us with any questions or comments to podcast@uuopodcast.com, or even better, record your message at speakpipe.com/uuopodcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest, keyword UUO Podcast. Check out our blog for even more content at uuopodcast.com. And finally, our sponsors, Fairy Godmother Travel, are here to help with all your Universal vacation needs. So check them out today at fairygodmothertravel.com. Well, that's a wrap. See you next week.